Morning, sir.
Only six participants are available. Just a moment.
Hello, Swami sir. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning.
You can start with the session.
Yes, sir. I am
We have
sharing
already
my
made
PPT.
you co-host. You can start.
Yes, sir. I am sharing my PPT, sir.
Please. Okay.
Can you see this PPT?
Yes, sir.
So, good morning, all of you. Today's our session is about risk management, risk as opportunities. First, we will discuss about definition of risk management. First definition is risk has been defined as the possibility of occurrence of an unfavorable deviation from the unexpected. Second, risk is the possibility that something will happen that will have a negative effect. Third, and simple definition, the possibility of occurrences of loss. Fourth, risk is defined as the uncertain event actually causing harm. we know about the risk, and I will explain it more detail. When such unexpected events occur, there is invariably a sense of loss, which may or may not be measurable in terms of money. For example, when your vehicle get unexpectedly stolen, there is a money loss which can be measured. In this example, we can see that when any occurrences happen with us, it denotes that it's a risk, expected or unexpected. But if your favorite pet dies unexpectedly, you feel a great loss is not measurable. Means measurable and unmeasurable risks are there. Different meanings of risk. The risk has a variety of meanings in business and everyday life. As its most general level, risk is used to describe any situation where there is uncertainty about what outcome will occur. Life is obviously very risky. Even the short term future is often highly uncertain. Means you can understand that risk and uncertainty is both the different terms but related to each other. In probability and statistics, financial management and investment management, risk is often used in a more specific sense to indicate possible variability in outcomes around some expected value. The modern risk landscape, the paradigm shift, risk management is no longer just about avoidance, it is about intelligent risk taking. We will develop the ideas of expected value and risk as reflecting variability around the expected value. For now, it is sufficient for you to think of the expected value as the outcome that would occur on average if a person or business were repeatedly exposed to the same type of risk. If you have not yet encountered this concept in statistics or finance class, the following example from the sports world might help. Here, an example given. For example, Allen Everson has averaged about 30 points per game in his career in the National Basketball Association. As we write this, he shows little sign of showing down. What he's showing? Slow down. It is therefore reasonable to assume that the expected value of his total points in any given game is about 30 points. And his rate is averagely going down. Risk in the sense of variability around the expected value is clearly present. He might score 50 points or even higher in a particular game, or he might score as few as 10 points. When you play cricket or other game, there are also risks available. Means in cricket, how many runs you should have to do is not certain, is uncertain, because it depends upon the bowler. In other situation, the term risk may refer to the expected losses associated with a situation in insurance markets. For example, it is common to refer to high risk policyholders. The meaning of risk in this context is that the expected value of losses to be paid by the insurer, the expected loss is high. As another example, California often is described as having a high risk of earthquake. Two countries are there where earthquakes is in on high risk. First is California and second is Japan. So you can find there are all the houses built up with wood, only wood. No cement and bricks are there. Only wooden houses you will find in Japan. While this statement might encompass the notion of variability around the expected value, it usually simply means that California expected loss of earthquakes is high relative to the other states. Risk is sometimes used in a specific sense to describe variably around the expected value and other times to describe the expected losses. We employ each of these meanings in this because it is customary to do so in certain types of risk management and in the insurance business. The particular meaning usually will be obvious from the context. Risk is costly. Why? We will see. Regardless of the specific meaning of risk being used, greater risk usually implies the greater cost. To illustrate the cost of risk, we use a simple example. Suppose that two identical homes are in different but equally attractive locations. The structure have the same value. For example, the structure is around 1 lakh as an example. And initially there is no risk of damage to either house. Then scientists announced that the meteor might hit the earth in the coming week and that one house is in the potential impact area. We would naturally say that one house now has greater risk than the other. Let's assume that everyone agrees that the probability of one house being hit by the meteor is 0.1 and the probability of the other house being hit is 0. Also assume that the house would be completely destroyed if it is hit. Approximately the cost of that house is 1 lakh would be lost. Then the unexpected property loss at one house is greater by an amount equal to 0.1 times to 1 lakh or 10,000. If the owner were to sell the house immediately following the release of news about the meteor, potential buyer would naturally pay less than 1 lakh for the house. No one will take the risk if already we have the idea that there will be earthquake. So no one will take a decision of losses. Okay. So no one will give the cost of that house near about 1 lakh. It may be less than 1 lakh. Rational people would pay at least 10,000 less because that is the expected loss from the meteor. Thus, greater risk in the sense of higher expected losses is costly to the original homeowner. Okay, this will be really loss of that homeowner. Means if he has to sell that house on 90,000, he will loss of 10,000. If he will have to sell that property on 50,000, he will have loss of 50,000. Mean 50% loss he will gain. The value of the house would drop by the at least the expected loss. In addition to expected losses, one homeowner has greater uncertainty in the sense that potential outcomes have greater variation. At the end of the week, one house will be worth 1 lakh with certainty, but the other house could be worth 0 or 1 lakh. This greater uncertainty about the value of the house also is likely to impose cost on the owner. Because of the greater uncertainty, potential buyer might require a price decrease in excess of the expected loss. Means, for example, 10,000. Let's say the additional price drop is 5,000. Thus, greater risk in the sense of a greater uncertainty is also costly to the original homeowner. To summarize this example, illustrate that both meanings of risk depicted in are costly. In this example, the value of the house declined by the expected loss, the first meaning of risk, plus an additional amount due to increased uncertainty, the second meaning of risk. As you will see throughout this book, risk management is concerned with decreasing the cost of risk. Direct versus indirect expected losses. We will find when considering the potential losses from a risky situation, you must consider indirect losses that arises in addition to direct losses. In the previous example, if the material destroyed the house, the direct loss would be of 1 lakh. Means if the house is of that owner, if he kept that owner to him or her. Indirect losses arise as a consequences of direct losses. If the house were destroyed, the owner would likely have additional expenses such as hotel and restaurant cost. These additional expenses would be indirect losses. Means what happen if due to meteor or earthquake the house get lost, what will happen, where he will live? He must have to live in hotel or anywhere where he must have to pay the cost. Means his or her expenses will be enhanced. And another example, when a person's car is damaged, the time spent getting it repaired is an indirect loss. Because if you want to go to your office by a car on rent car or owner car, your own ownership car is damaged with accident, you must have to take another car on rent. Means you have to pay another cost. Indirectly is the indirect loss. For businesses, indirect losses are extremely important. Indeed, as we discuss in later, the possibility of indirect losses in one of the main reasons that businesses try to reduce risk. The major type of indirect losses that can arise from the risk faced by businesses. For example, damage to productive assets can produce an indirect loss by reducing or eliminating the normal profit, new cash flow that the asset would have generated if the damage had not occurred. Large direct losses also can lead to indirect losses if they threaten the viability of the business and thereby reduce the willingness of customers and suppliers to deal with the business, or change the terms, prices at which they transact. Hello, I am audible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Moreover, if sales or production are reduced in response to direct losses, certain types of normal operating expenses, known as continuing expenses, may not decline in proportion to the reduction in revenues, thus increasing indirect losses. If a long interruption in production would cause many customers to switch suppliers, or if a firm has binding contractual commitment to supply products, it also may be desirable for the firm to increase operating cost above normal levels following direct losses. A simple example I can share with you that if you want to take printouts of your company brochures, pamphlets, you will go to a offset printer. But what's happened if the machines of that offset printer are not working properly or in under maintenance? What will happen? You will stop to repair that machine, or you will choose another option to print your pamphlet or brochure of your company. You definitely choose another options because that offset is not of your own ownership. So you have the options. Means I can suggest you that everyone must have to select outsourcings instead of to start our own productions, because there should be risk. If a long interruption in production would cause many customers to switch suppliers, what will happen? Will switch suppliers. Or if a firm has binding a contractual commitment to supply products, it also be desirable for the firm to increase operating cost above normal levels following direct losses. For example, some businesses might find it desirable to maintain production by leasing replacement equipment at a higher cost. So, as to avoid the loss of sales, the increased operating cost would create an indirect loss. Similarly, a business that decided to recall defective products that have produced liability claims will incur a product recall expenses and perhaps increase the advertising cost to reduce damage to the firm's reputations. Sometimes what's happened, I have given the example of your pamphlet or brochure printing to a offset printer. This is a simple example. If the owner of that offset know the risk that if you will choose another option to print your pamphlets or brochure, what will happen? He will get loss. Which loss? Next time you will print your another uh, printings of another stationery materials from that another offset owner. Okay, so he will loss of a regular clients or customer. Other forms of indirect losses include the possibility that the business will face a higher cost of obtaining funds from lenders or from new equity issues following large direct losses. In some cases, the large cost of rising capital will cause the firm to forgo making otherwise profitable investments. Finally, in this case, observed directly and indirect losses, the firm might have to recognize or be liquid dated through costly legal proceeding under bankruptcy law. No one will be in the position or interested to become a bankrupt. The risk management process: identify application, finding potential threats before they materialized, analysis, determining the likelihood and potential impact, evaluations, prioritizing risk based on the risk appetite of the organization, treatment, deciding to avoid, mitigate, transfer, or accept the risk, monitoring, continuous oversights using real time data. Enhancing shareholder wealth by better managing business risk. We have to enhance wealth by better managing business risk. International Federation of Accountants covers best practices and current thoughts leadership with regard to risk management. The central thesis of the paper is that sustainable growth in shareholder value is inextricably linked to risk, which requires a response, which is turn drive value. Companies must understand what the drivers of the value are and what are the key risks associated with them. The answer to these questions can be formulated by mapping the process that drive value within the organization and by identification and analyzing the business risk and establishing the appropriate responses that will have minimum impact on the value drivers. Risk identification and definition should be approached in a systematic way. Organization must develop a sound understanding of the strategic and operational objectives of the organizations. Means before to start work, you must have to set your objective to face the risk. For example, we have given you a research and your research title is submitted by you with objectives. Means what will be objective of your research. So every company must have to set their objective, mission and vision statements also. Organization must develop a sound understanding of strategic and operational objective of the organizations, including critical success factors and the opportunities that threats related to the achievement of this objective. Organization must also analyze the functions undertaken within the organization to identify the significant risks which flow from these activities. Once risks have been identified, an assessment of possible impact and corresponding likelihood of occurrence must be made using consistent parameters. Risk maps or risk matrix are a simple yet powerful way of displaying the relationship between likelihood and impact for the key identified risk, thus providing both measurement and reporting of the risk profile. All companies face threats in the current dynamic environment: new competition, new technology, changes in customer taste, and so on. These are also risk risk tools. Why? Because competition is rising day by day. There are different types of companies and there are different types of competitors available in the market. New technology, the computer and internet we using in our business. Now AI is there to make our work very fast. But there are also risks about cyber threats in this technology. We must be able to face these risks. but only a few of them manage these risks effectively. Those who do so are alert to changes in the environment and are willing to change internally to respond to them. This is the main point which drives home in the strategic planning and risk management. The we discuss how risk must be dealt with formulating the implementing strategy. A brief overview of the tools and techniques available for strategic planners is also provided. Strategic planning plays the crucial role of enabling a company to anticipate and deal with risk efficiently. Strategic planning is all about positioning an organization to take full advantages of opportunities in the environment while simultaneously reducing its vulnerability to threats. Few times what's happened when share rates is getting down, few people takes is as a opportunity to purchase the shares on low cost. Means few of us will find opportunity in the risk. Thus, good strategic planning implies the ability to digest what is happening in the environment and reshape the organization accordingly. It becomes easier to do this if an organization is prepared for various eventualities. Then an event unfold in the environment, it is in a better position to decide which strategy would you work best. Thinking, on the other hand, makes the employees of an organization impervious to external developments. When changes do occur, they are taken by surprise. In short, by being open to various possibilities and examining the possible course of actions for each of them, strategic planning can, to a large extent, keep risk within manageable limits. Many companies get into problems because their leaders fail to address an important question. What happens if we are wrong? Means we must have answer of our questions before setting our objectives of our organization. In other words, they badly misjudge the risk inherent in their decisions. Scenario planning is a useful tool for companies to managing risk. Suppose you are a manager of a company or organization, you must have to set all the risk objectives and the questions what will be arise in future. You must have to prejudge observation, last observations, current environmental situations, and technology. Now explains that there are two very different types of scenario planning. One is exploratory, trying to understand the contours of an unknown landscape, the future mainly out of a general sense of interest. An exploratory approach may be helpful in seeking out potentially unforeseen risks. The second class of scenarios that relating to decision making helps achieve a better understanding and management of risk. Decision makers evaluate risk in situations of great uncertainty, largely by engaging in collective self delusion. They start out with a preferred scenario, the conventional wisdom, the accepted view of the official future. There are five questions which decision makers should raise to examine whether their preferred scenario is appropriate. If they could speak with an oracle, what questions would they ask about the future given the decision to face? What is the scenario for the best possible outcome? What is the scenario for the worst possible outcome? If they were retiring or leaving the company, what would they want their erstwhile colleagues to consider as their legacy? Finally, are there important barriers to change in the organizations? I can suggest you that you also have to set questions, uh, 5 plus 1 techniques. What is 5 plus 1 techniques? That is questions related to what, when, where, why, when, and how. This is the techniques you must have to use in your organizations to set the questions. Scenario not only facilitate a better decision making, but also lead to gradual changes in the perceptual model of the decision makers themselves. Decision makers can reconstruct their perceptions and change their minds and ultimately change their agenda even as they go forward. Now, I would like to explain the use of real options in risk management. The concept of real options applies the techniques developed in financial options theory to the analysis of non-financial real assets. Real options are valuable as they confer the right but not the obligation to take some actions in future. The real option approach emphasizes that many investment create important follow-on opportunities that a company may not subsequently exploit. Consequently, the real option approach highlights value that is contingent to on earlier investments. Real options come into existence as a result of the company's strategic investment because their underlying assets do not trade in liquid markets. Real options also present unique valuation challenges. The real options perspective has significantly implications for the conception and implementation of a strategy and risk management. Risk options analyze, encourages, executes to confront fundamental sources of uncertainty proactively rather than merely attempting to buffer against or avoid uncertainties. For example, real option analysis encourages managers to create value and risk by making strategic investments that confer claims on potentially lucrative opportunities, actively monitoring various sources of uncertainties and changing resource allocations appropriately in the real time. Real options come in handy when the markets for financial options are incomplete. A good example is uncertainty relating to a technology. A second related consideration is the desired time horizon for risk protections, while financial options provide cover against uncertainties for relatively sports periodical, typically less than several months. Many uncertainties to which a company is exposed are resolved only after more lengthy time intervals. Several illustration of real options. For example, investment in a geographically dispersed foreign subsidiaries confer the options to switch activities across borders in response to changes in currency markets, factor markets, or product markets. This option is likely to be particularly valuable when there are changes in local demand, labor expenses, other input costs, competitor actions, or foreign exchange rates, all of which may vary from country to country. Similarly, international joint ventures enhance flexibility and reduce risk. A company can reduce its inherent liability of forgiveness. Its back of local knowledge, networks, familiarities with businesses, customs, and so on. By taking on a local partner, the company can also tap into the unique skills of a collaborator to shore up weaknesses in its own capability base. Income stream risk can be reduced during the course of the joint venture by sharing equity. Finally, risk associated with making heavy initial resource commitment in certain industries can be mitigated by expanding sequentially. For instance, if a company has the right but not the obligation to buy out the partner, the company will go ahead and expand through acquisition. You may studied about merging and acquisitions. Acquisition of other companies in our company means to expand our organization. We must have to proceed for the acquisition process. If at some point in the future the value of the part of the joint venture it does not already own exceeds the buyout's price. I would like to explain the flexibility created by the real options approach to management. They point out that the value of a real options increased with uncertainty. But unfortunately, many companies do not appreciate the value of options embedded in their investments. The building blocks of the real options approaches are here are given few options. Uncertainty creates opportunity and value. Other value creation requires certain decision to be taken. Sources of uncertainty must be identified and necessary information should be collected. Decisions that promote exposure to favorable outcomes must be identified. Decisions that reduce exposure to downside risk must be identified, and optimum decision rules must be established to optimize the risk. Here you can see a chart, the heat map. Here are different ranges given. The green area denotes that it's a desirable risk, means no action required. Other light green is given as acceptable. We can monitor it. Undesirable means yellow, means we must have to take action. Unacceptable means orange color, urgent actions required, and catastrophic means stop, means this is the high risk area. We will share these PPTs with you later on. Tools such as decision analysis, real options, and scenario planning can be used appropriately in situations of uncertainty. Option theory is useful when market information is available, when coping with private risk, which cannot be hedged in financial markets. Decision analysis is preferable. Decision analysis has the following building blocks: visual tools for constructing multi-stage decision problems, just like this map; probability theory for modeling uncertainty; utility theory for modeling risk preferences, extensions to decision problem with multiple co- conflicting objectives. Now we should have to point out that risk management of innovation project is an important task for Unilever. Unilever has thousands of projects running at any given time. This paper discussed the methodology employed by Unilever in analyzing risk in innovation projects. The process employed by Unilever is neither technically complicated nor very quantitative. Benefits for Unilever include increased information sharing, higher team commitment, and development mechanism to deal with complicated issues. You may know the product of Unilever company, Lux soap, Hamam soap, Santur soap. All these are products of Unilever company. Even Lifebuoy, you may seen the advertisement of this soap. These are product of Unilever company. This is not an Indian company. The risk faced by oil companies and how they can be managed. Whiteside emphasized the need for oil companies to understand the impact of risk on the value of their investment and the company's cash flows and long-term value. The paper outlined a quantitative process for understanding, assessing, the managing a portfolio of risk and rewards. Oil and gas company faces many risks. This includes capacity expansion risk, acquisition risk, operation risk, political risk, health risk, health safety, environmental and catastrophic risk, equity prices risk, foreign exchange risk, interest rate risk, and credit risk. These issues are covered in enterprise risk management. A diversified company began its integrated risk management program in 1997. That is Honeywell. Under this program, Honeywell tried to group risk and manage them together instead of dealing with each of them separately. Among the risks which confronted Honeywell are marketing risk, operational risk, environmental risk, political risk, regulatory risk, intellectual property risk, litigation risk, and financial risk. DBS means Development Bank of Singapore, is one of the leading bank in Asia. The major risks faced by DBS include credit market and operational risk. We have also seen in our nearest banks, uh, that cooperative banks, how they are facing the problems about recovery of their loan. So they have also the risk of recovery loan amounts from their creditors or loan holders. The heat map visualize property. You can see where red zone shown, yellow zone and green zone shown. Red zone means critical threats requiring immediate capital and attention. Risks to be monitored and mitigate where cost effective. And green zone, bottom left, low impact risks that can be accepted as a cost of doing business. Emerging risks in 2026 means current year. Cyber resilience, moving from firewalls to zero trust architecture as AI driven cyber attacks become more sophisticated. You may know the knowledge about computer, internet, and cyber security because there are so many problems arising due to cyber security issues by the banks and personal level also. People are cheating with the phone calls received from the cheaters. They give options that you have a lottery, means you win a lottery tickets and you will get 10 lakhs, 1 crore, or different types of vehicles that you will get from the company. And they are taking OTP of that personal man or woman and transfer their amounts from their banks. Climate and ESG risk. Regularity pressure like CSRD. Climates makes environmental impact a financial liability. AI governance. The risk of algorithmic bias and the legal implications of autonomous AI decision making. Now we are also using AI in our study level. For example, ChatGPT, Gemini is there, Copilot is there, and others also there. Talent scarcity, the operational risk of losing tribal knowledge as the workforce shift, means to enhance the knowledge, company must have to do few programs to their employee to get new knowledge about accepting new technology. Tools for model risk management, predictive analysis using historical data to forecast future failures, scenario planning, war gaming, different features. For example, what happen if the interest rate is hit 8%? This is Monte Carlo simulations using Bayesian probability to update profiles as new evidence emerge. Suppose we have kept amount as a fixed deposit as an investment in bank, and we know the rate of interest is fixed, that we will get 6%, 7% on a particular durations. But in a share market, what happens? There is not a fixed interest rate. It always volatile. It may increase or may decrease. So there are high risk, but high risk means high gain also. So so many persons are taking that high risk. We will discuss this formula in next page. A Monte Carlo simulation is a mathematical techniques used to model the probability of different outcomes in a process that cannot easily be predicted due to presence of a random variables. It is a computational algorithm that relies on a repeated random sampling to obtain numerical results. Random sampling method. You will also find these methods in your research paper. There are two types of sampling methods. One is probability sampling and another is non-probability sampling, where a random sampling method or systematic random sampling method comes in probab sampling method. There are another options also available. By running a model thousands of even millions of times, each with a different random inputs, The simulation provides a range of possible outcomes and the likelihood of the occurring. Practical applications where we use this risk management, the fields are finance, project management, engineering, and science. In finance, estimating the value risk, VAR, the abbreviation of value at risk is VAR. In a portfolio or pricing complex options, project management, predicting the likelihood of cost overturn, overruns or project delays by accounting for uncertain task durations. In engineering, assessing the reliability of the technical system or the risk of structural failures. It is related to operational systems. And last, science, studying the behavior of subatomic particles or predicting weather patterns. Bayesian probability is a way of calculating the likelihood of an event based on prior knowledge of conditions that might be related to the event, unlike frequentist probability, which only looks at how often sometimes happens over many trials. Bayesian probability allows you to update your beliefs as new evidence comes in. The formula here, the formula Bayer's theorem given. The specification of that formula is given here. The mathematical foundation is in Bayes theorism, which describes the probability of an event A given that event B has occurred. Means two probability compared A and B. Cultivating a risk aware culture, psychological safety. Employee must feel safe reporting near misses without fear to punishment of punishment. Decentralization, empowering frontline managers to make risk decisions rather than waiting for corporate approval. The pre-mortem imaging, a project has failed and working backward to determine why. Thank you. Today's session is over. Now, all the students must understand that you should have to submit your project title immediately because we have to bifurcate it. We have to select a single title. So the remaining students, those not submitted their project title and objective, must have to submit today only. Okay. Thank you. This session is over.